We might be halfway into January, but we still need to take one last look back into 2019. It's time for the quarterly wrap-up. This time around, things are getting a little supernatural, delving into gothic pinball games and stepping into the shoes of a literal demon pulling out the big guns to fight the techno forces of heaven. Or just Nazi soldiers being framed as terrifying Silent Hill monsters. But either way, the games on this list elevate the mundane into the mystical, drape themselves in the magical, or divorce themselves from reality entirely. First up, Demon's Tilt. The tagline on Demon Tilt's tin is occult pinball action, and the game definitely lives up to it with some strong Castlevania vibes. But Demon's Tilt is special for far more than just its aesthetic, because this game fully 110% embraces its digital medium and every advantage that comes with it to create an experience you'd have a hard time replicating with a physical pinball machine. The fact that this thing is a triple-decker monstrosity is only the beginning. There are boss monsters you get to kill. Enemies actually screw with your ball by firing projectiles at it that kill its momentum. There are these portals that can just send you to different parts of the table, and most thematically fitting, your ball can get straight up possessed and flung in random directions that defy physics. And to make up for all these extra obstacles complicating your pinball playing experience, the game lets you liberally bump the table to affect the ball's trajectory, something the game doesn't just actively encourage, but tries to get across as a necessary skill to learn to succeed at it. But perhaps my favorite part of Demon's Tilt is just how dense the table is. I mentioned before that this is a 3-tier pinball machine, and each tier has at least 2 objectives built into it, with a boss to fight and your usual pinball mini-quests that want you to hit a specific ramp, kill a certain type of enemy, or hit some bumpers. No matter where you are, there's always a specific active objective to shoot for beyond just mindlessly racking up points, and as you bounce between tiers, that objective changes on the fly every 10 seconds. Demon's Tilt's greatest strengths can also sometimes be its only weakness, however. This game is extremely visually busy, and sometimes, especially when my ball is teleporting around or possessed, I can lose track of it underneath all the shiny, gloriously rendered pixels. But that's the only real issue I've had with Demon's Tilt. And I'm by all means not a pinball connoisseur, but from my viewpoint on the outside looking in, this is an awesome entry into the genre, and one that even casual, curious players can enjoy. Brukel. So when the last Modern Warfare dropped in October, it made a big deal about how its campaign was going to capture war how it really is. It was going to be gritty, it was going to be raw, it wasn't going to pull any punches. And it, kinda fumbled trying to do that. And then a week or so later, Brukel came out, and its brief little 1-hour story did what Call of Duty failed to do. Tell an actually compelling story that successfully captures just a sliver of the grim reality of war. Brukel is an extremely personal and singular game, a mostly biographical story about the designer's own living grandmother, a Belgian woman named Bie Verlinden. In the game, you're in the shoes of a developer's stand-in as he explores a virtual recreation of Bie's childhood home, Brukel. But here's the kicker. As you explore the house and take pictures of different items, Bie herself delivers the voiceover as she recounts old anecdotes and memories about her life there.
En dat was Bertha, dat was echt een moeder voor de kinderen. Hè? Dat is echt zo. Maar dat was een film. Oh. En dat was geen koopsel, een bekwame vrouw.
And at first, the anecdotes are rather unassuming, just talking about how technology was drastically different back in her time and the day-to-day goings-ons on the farm. But they quickly start taking a darker turn, because Bie lived during World War II, and when the soldiers come marching into her countryside town, Brukel goes full horror game. To say much more would spoil the entire experience, but it's a bit of a tragedy how hard people are sleeping on this game. Brukel is more than a little rough around the edges, with its fair share of technical issues and a side of jank. But in the face of such a unique game and the poignant story it tells, it's hard to care about a few blemishes. And in a time when the biggest shooter franchises around are struggling to be anything more than toothless, self-backpatting oorah fests, Brukel is a desperately welcome sip of fresh air you only very occasionally get to see. Profane. Hey, a boss rush game! It's been a while since I've gotten to cover one of these. The easiest way to describe Profane is that it's Fury minus the slashy sword bits. Nothing but big, multi-health bar bosses, flashy neon aesthetic, and a lot of bullet hell projectiles you have to avoid. Profane's big twist, however, is that instead of a health bar, you have a countdown timer you have to kill the boss in, and every time you get hit, that timer ticks down faster. In my opinion, this twist functionally does almost nothing to actually change how you play compared to its genre peers, and really isn't all that noteworthy. But that doesn't stop Profane from being a solidly constructed and compelling game, because they came up with some pretty inventive bosses. Like this guy, whose boss fight starts with projectiles literally coming at you in time with a slowly elevating heartbeat. Or this cool-ass Lich dude with a separate phylactery you have to hit and a spectral axe he flings around. What's also a little more interesting than the timer are the loadout abilities, which give you different superpowers and passive buffs. There's nothing revolutionary here, but it's still a fun system to play around with, and you can noticeably differentiate your playstyle based on what you pick. But I think I might have broken it? Overall, Profane is a pretty straightforward and simple game, but it's also a perfectly respectable one, and its particular niche is sparse enough to elevate that moderate praise to must-play status for fans of boss rushes and big boss fights in general. Give it a look. Arsenal Demon. Arsenal Demon is old-school 90s shooter schlock in the best way. It's a chop-till-you-drop shooter a la Devil Daggers, flying at 1,000,000 miles an hour with a Doom-level closet of hyper-powered weapons and a randomly generated skyscraper city block to duke it out on. Arsenal Demon gets a lot of things right, most notably almost everything to do with the player. Most of the weapons are all solid, entertaining, and completely over the top, from your basic revolvers that sound like to railguns and a sword that shoots laser beams. Best of all, you can mix and match any two to dual wield and build your own kit. And movement is not just blisteringly fast, but also executed spot on and mechanically encouraged, as moving builds up meter for special attacks. What also works surprisingly well is the random generation. 90% of the time, you can actually get some pretty interesting vertically focused levels that have you leaping from skyscraper to skyscraper as you keep ahead of the angelic horde. If Arsenal Demon has an Achilles heel, however, it's clearly your opposition. Both mechanically and aesthetically, the mechanical angels you're fighting are a little underwhelming. There are a few standout enemies, like these laser beam disco balls that affect the entire map and teleport around when damaged, but for the majority of enemies, your tactics are the same. Don't stand next to them as they slowly drift towards you and you won't get hit, but the moment one of them does get close, you're pretty much done. They make for entertaining enough target dummies to give you an excuse to play around with the gameplay mechanics, but not much more. But you know what? That's enough! This game's just extremely entertaining to move and shoot through, even by 90s shooter standards, and that juice is the beating heart of what makes this game so worthwhile. Manifold Garden. I think I stopped and just went, about 4 times in the first 15 minutes in Manifold Garden. This game loves to go from small spaces directly out into massive ones, and while the effect wears off after an hour, the first few times they pull this trick are genuinely jaw-dropping. Manifold Garden's otherworldly aesthetic is inspired by MC Escher, but even beyond all the brain-twisting architecture porn, there's a decently meaty puzzle game that screams antechamber underneath. So in Manifold Garden, every mathematical plane has its own assigned color. Literally everything in the game is cube-shaped, so that means 6 planes. Top of the cube is blue, bottom is red, so on. And you can swap between these planes at will. Just run up to a wall, click on it, boom, new plane. And as you'll notice, gravity shifts around with you, because gravity only affects the plane that you're currently on. This becomes important because most puzzles revolve around objects that share a color with one plane or another. If you're on the blue plane, you can manipulate blue boxes, but so can gravity. If you're on any other color plane, that blue box will ignore gravity, but you also can't interact with it. And when Manifold Garden is at its best, its puzzles are all about finding ways to manipulate these blocks into impossible places that defy all laws of physics. And when it's at its worst, it's mostly just about wandering in circles for 15 minutes until you find the one thing amongst all the visual noise you need in a random corner of the puzzle. Luckily, it's the former more often than the latter, but yeah, this game's got lows to match its highs. Oh yeah, they've also got this thing where the entire puzzle just repeats endlessly into the void, so you can jump off the bottom of a building and loop around to land on its roof. It's really cool and becomes a regular part of the puzzle-solving process. Manifold Garden's biggest boon is its aesthetic, which I think can speak well enough for itself, but underneath that, the actual puzzling hits more often than it doesn't. If you're into artsy puzzlers, there's a lot here that's going to feel pretty familiar. There's a little bit of Portal, there's a lot of bit of antechamber logic, and most notably, it falls along similar lines as fellow indie puzzler Etherborn. But even so, nothing else exists at quite the same intersection of puzzle ideas as Manifold Garden does, and it presents its particular take on the genre with some significant panache. That's it for this quarter's wrap-up of games, but if you're looking for more recent short titles, I've got a whole long backlog of reviews you could check out. I've been doing this for almost 2 years now, so there's a huge backlog of great, short games that will absolutely blow your mind. And if you've got a game I missed from the last 3 months that you liked, give that game a plug in the comments. And if you liked this video, hey, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all next week.